Welcome everybody to our interview of Jack Phillips. I asked him if he prefers to go by Dr. Phillips, Dr. Jack Phillips. He says Jack is fine, which tells me just how phenomenal he is. Very humble individual, Jack. I'll throw that out there. But Jack is the chairman of ROI Institute. If you guys are not familiar, you need to check it out. And he has his methodology right behind him, which is phenomenal. He is a world-renowned accountability, measurement, and evaluation expert. Phillips is a former HR executive and consults with Fortune 500 companies and major global organizations. Jack, the author and or editor of more than 75 books, conducts workshops and presents at conferences globally. Jack has been recognized and awarded for his work by numerous professional organizations, and one recently that he got in 2022 from the Association of Talent Development. You got the Talent Development Thought Leader Award, and along with your wife, Dr. Patty Phillips. And let's see, and you, I think the Thought Leader, and you also got an award for an ROI Institute book with the Best HR Book Study, right? Book Award. So the Best HR Book Award. So
that's a Sherm Book Award when they used to give that a few years ago for the Society of Human Resource Management. We had the best book one year.
That's amazing. That's quite an accomplishment. And his work has been featured at the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Fortune Magazine, and several television programs, including CNN, have interviewed him. So you guys are in for a treat today. We're super excited, very humbled that you would take your time out today to talk to us, HR leaders, business leaders, people who want to get better. And so we're super excited. At the very end, guys, we'll talk about, you'll see the free gift. He's been very gracious as a digital copy of one of his books as well, some strategies. So super excited. Jack, I would love to know, could you give us a brief overview of your journey and experience in this domain? Why did you feel that the need to emphasize the importance of an HR strategy, right? Everybody talks about a lot of different HR things, but you have this HR strategy is super important. Tell us why, how that journey came about for you.
Well, from my experience, I was the HR leader, HR head in 3 companies. And one of those was a Fortune 500 company. We always had a strategy. Of course, the company had a strategy, but we made sure that HR was well represented in that strategy. And it just worked for me so well, and it worked for the organization. And so it helped us get where we want to go, and it helped us build some partnerships, and it helps us drive some key metrics in the organization. Now, I got more interested in writing this book when I was asked to teach a course on HR strategy for a graduate program, and I looked at the human capital strategy book they were using, and I just wasn't impressed with it. And I looked around, and there wasn't enough out there. Most of the strategies talking about how we attract employees, how do we process and work with employees, develop them, motivate them, keep them happy, keep them healthy, protect them, and then guide their retirement. Well, that's necessary. That's that kind of fundamental, but there's so many other things that we need to be aware of and think about. And I just didn't see them in these books. And so we wanted a book that says, let's look at all the forces driving organizations these days. And they're going to happen to us whether we like it or not, or want it or not. And they affect us so much. So many of those have to be well organized and have a strategy around it. And HR really ought to be in the mix, in most cases, driving those strategies. And finally, these days, I work with a nonprofit. It's one of the largest autism centers in the USA. We've grown that significantly. I've been on the board for about 30 years, if you can imagine. But now I served as chairman of the board a couple of times, but now my role is chair of the strategic planning committee. So we have a 2-year strategy that we develop and implement. And it's really driving that organization where we want to be. These days, where autism is such a growing challenge and autism centers are struggling so much, we're not struggling. We're healthy financially. We're healthy in terms of what we do. but I think our strategies had a big part of that. And if you look at our strategy, human capital is a big part of that. So those are the driving forces for us to come to this book, High Impact Human Capital Strategy, that we'd like to give a copy to any individual who'd like to have that.
Yeah, Jack, thank you for your work with the autism. I work with a lot of nonprofits, and that is part of the conversation is that can be game changing for a nonprofit is when you have the right strategy to really drive those results, which does include if you build a strategy within an organization that does not include your human capital, my opinion is you're doing it wrong, because you can't get to that result without your people.
No.
You just can't do it. So I love that. Thank you for that book. I also think it's extremely valuable. So if you don't have one, go out and get it today. It's exciting because having that strategy is so impactful. How would you define an HR strategy, and why do you think it's vital for every organization, regardless of the size, to have one? So we have business leaders, people who are just starting their businesses. I mean, we have quite a diverse. Why is that important to have an HR strategy?
Well, yes, basically it's a direction we want to go. It's where we want to take the organization with very specific goals. And as part of that, it's going to be some very precise measurements along the way so that we know the progress we're making and the changes we have to make if adjustments are needed. So without it, we just are reacting to whatever happens and adjusting, and we really are not in charge of this situation. The strategy lets us drive the situation the way we want it.
Right. Quick question, and this is a little off, but during the pandemic, one of the things that I saw was we had a lot of businesses that were shutting down. And it was interesting to me. I was having a conversation and someone said, oh, COVID, this whole thing. And I said, well, I challenged that a little bit. I think a lot of organizations went out because they did not have what you're talking about, which is an HR strategy. And when you're reacting to what's happening, as you're saying, then you're not actually being at the front of what's happening. And so if you want to be a recession-proof business, if you want to be one of those organizations that stays, I think that's spot on, Jack, is you need to have that strategy so you're not reacting. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead. Did you have something?
I certainly would agree. Just for the pandemic, I'd say we give HR very plus in terms of protecting employees, being concerned about them, using empathy, and really getting everyone to be concerned about employees and their well-being. I give them a minus in managing the remote work situation because I think HR lost control of that. So many senior executives got involved, and they were making decisions without data, and were just surveying employees and said, do you want to come back to work or not? And we know how that's going to go. And so to me, they missed the opportunity of going to the first level supervisor and say, is it working? Are you okay with it? And we just failed to get that. And so that's another workshop probably, but I don't think we managed that as well as we could.
And yeah, I agree. And I think that's one, would you agree that's something we could put in our HR strategy is how do you actually navigate remote? Because it's not going away. It's going to continue to evolve and change. But thank you for that honesty too, because I think you're right. The focus was so much on, we just want people to feel good, that there was no contact. There was no way to manage and control what was happening. And that could be a train wreck for sure. In what ways can leaders ensure that their strategy aligns with the evolving needs of the organization, particularly in fostering innovation?
Yes. First, you developing your strategy, you have to partner with the leaders there and making sure that we're all working together, that we're basically supporting them, but we're trying to drive this particular issue. We just got to make sure we're together and we're one big team to get there. Now, you mentioned innovation. We work with innovation a lot. One of our books is called The Value of Innovation. It's a Wiley publication, and it's how we've helped organizations with innovation. Here's a pretty bold statement. I think HR should be in charge of innovation in an organization. Now, in reality, it's not occurring very rarely. I think it should, because innovation is about getting the creative spark out of employees, getting their ideas and transforming those ideas into meaningful projects for the organization or for the customers externally. What better organization is equipped to do that? It's HR. But yet we work in organizations where engineering is in charge of innovation. We've seen operations in charge of innovation, or even marketing in charge of innovation. I think HR has got to be a big part of it. It may be a hard sell to say, we should be in charge of it. The chief innovation officer should report to the chief HR officer. That's maybe hard to convince someone, but I think it ought to be there, because the number one source of innovation is the employees.
Yes.
Yes.
And the diversity of innovation that you get, because you have one person versus 50 people are creating innovation. That's beautiful. Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I just want to mention Jeff Bezos received a lot of awards from Amazon for being the most innovative CEO on the planet. But he quickly says, by the way, that's one of our clients, and we work with them. He quickly says, not me, it's our team and it's employees. And he's got a special program showing multiple paths to approval. That is, if you've got a great idea and your supervisor doesn't think it's a great idea, hey, here's some multiple paths you have to get that going. So he likes to push that, get that creative spirit out of the employees into something operational and meaningful. So he says, I'm not the innovator, employees are. I just try to create the environment to make it work. So you got to have it. HR has got to be front and center in innovation in an organization.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Beautiful. And we could go hours just for people in the audience. We already talked about, we could go for hours on any of these questions. So you may see something from us additionally later, but current market dynamics there's the gig economy, there's digital transformation, there's so much happening. We are in a really great time where innovation is happening around us, happening to us, all those different things. I would love to hear, and you address with the current dynamics of remote work, gig economy. How should HR strategies evolve to stay ahead? And you talked about HR being that innovator, but I'd love for you to go just deeper into how they can stay ahead.
So let's look at two categories there. One is technology in general has affected our organization. Now, when you look at the strategic direction around technology, it's usually driven by IT. Here's where I think we as HR need to partner with them, because what innovation brings some good things, but it brings some bad things. And so either way, HR has got to deal with it. If we are able to eliminate jobs, particularly those jobs that are monotonous and have a lot of accidents, we automated them out. This is where AI is going to make a big impact. But we've got that displacement if it causes displacement. Or we've got how do you mix robots with the workforce and have them work together in harmony? So the good side of that requires a lot of HR. But a lot of the downside of HR, where we have so much hacking and some scamming and everything going on, in our own company database it's a compromise, and we have to go out to the world and tell everybody, and you've got to constantly deal with that with the press, the employees, and everyone else. So you've got HR having to deal with the dark side of the technology. So I think that strategy has got to be together, that HR and technology leader working together with your strategy for technology. Now, when it comes to remote work, the key thing is we just don't do a good job showing the value of remote work or even hybrid work. Now, we've done studies on that, and it's a huge ROI for the company, particularly if it's totally remote. But the barriers there are the immediate managers who resist it often, and there's some barriers to engagement, collaboration, and even career progression. But you can manage those. But it's understanding with good data the situation, what works for the organization. And also what we often leave out in terms of trying to analyze the value of remote work is the effect it has on our environment. See, the number one thing that environmentalists tell us as companies we can do is to let people work at home, get them off the street. When we do studies about the value of remote work, we include the number of tons of carbon that we prevented from going into the environment. Hey, we all want to deal with that issue, but we often forget that as an important benefit of remote work. And also, we're helping your local city with the congestion. And any mayor or governor or county commissioner will tell you, if you can get some automobiles off the street, we would appreciate it. So you're helping in so many ways in doing that. But we often don't look at that. You've got three ROIs when you look at an ROI, when you look at a study about remote work. One is what's good for the employees. Their ROI is usually high. What's good for the company? Their ROI is usually high. What's good for the environment and external? And that's usually high as well. It should be a win-win for all of those to make it work. We just don't have enough data to make those good decisions and to support the right approach.
What do you think they're making those decisions on currently? So those are three phenomenal things to show the ROI. So what do you think is at the front of mind? What do you think is their decision making?
First, it's the CEOs putting their own spin on it. And I understand that, when Tim Cook builds that huge new corporate headquarters, designed it for collaboration, and he just gets it going and the pandemic comes, he wants people to come back to this great facility. And I can understand that. But when he gets a memo from 67 employees saying, look, we're more productive, where collaboration is great, we prefer to work at home, and if you're going to make us come to work, we're out of here. So he had to back off of that a little bit. So we're letting CEOs drive in their emotion and their preference of what should be done without looking at what's best for the organization and what's best for the people. So this is where HR has got to get control of this. Second, we rarely go to the first level supervisor for good data there. That's our great barometer there. If it's working well for your immediate boss, hey, it's going to work well for the organization. And we don't go there so much. And we rely too much on just pulse surveys to employees saying, would you like to come back to the office? Well, we know what they're going to say. No.
No, thank you.
We say they don't want to come back. Well, that's not a big surprise. And so that's, yes, one set of data, but the way we capture that sometimes is leading them almost into the answer that we expect out of them. And so collecting good data has been a challenge, and making the decision that's what's good for the whole organization. So again, this is probably a good subject just for us to spend some time on just with this particular topic.
Yeah, I love when you said the pulse survey, I was actually going back to my college years when they were talking about surveys and how, depending on how you ask the question, can drive the answer, and you're really not getting as clear, clean data as you could get as having those conversations. Yeah. And I think that's what I've heard you say over and over is you need to talk to people. Like, you actually need to be involved and engaged and communicating and collaborating. That's a big piece of the strategy.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Yeah, I want to get a little bit more into the sustainability. So we had kind of briefly talked about that before, but how can HR strategies be used to promote and embed environmentally sustainable practices within an organization?
All right. Here's another issue I think is so important. HR has got to have a big role in sustainability. And when I was CEO of a Fortune 500 company, this is a company with 300 plants, and our plants were crushed stone quarry, stone quarries, ready mix concrete, asphalt, and they're places that will often have environmental issues. The environmental and sustainability function, I should say, reported to me. And why? Because so much of what we needed to do is to change the mindsets and behaviors of employees. And that's why we put it over there in the HR, and we had that responsibility for the 8 years I was in that role. and some people would think, so you actually driving the sustainability, you're in HR? I said, yes. I said, because it's all about changing things. We're changing processes. It's managing change and it's changing mindsets. Who can do that better than HR? So we got to be involved in it, help that, and get our employees to understand why it's important for climate change issues, for example, and what they can do about it. You see, they sometimes don't do things because they fully don't understand the issues and they don't understand what they can do to make a difference. And that's all part of our process of trying to show how something works, like the sustainability initiative. It's not just the cost savings that comes out of it or the savings of energy or something that comes out of it, but it's you get there by having a good project that works quite well. So you get the right reaction from employees, get their mindset correct. You have them very knowledgeable of what is possible and what they can do and why it's needed, and then get them action oriented to do things to make it work. So HR has got to have a big role in that, ideally driving it. And we know it's been done. It's been done by my organization previously, but I'd like to see more and more HRs have that role in the company along with whatever they're doing.
Jack, I've seen a couple points that I just love. One is I've seen employees within an organization completely derail a plan that a CEO in an organization has because they have no buy-in, right? They're the ones that will make it happen or not make it happen. And so yes, definitely having your people, that's tough. You're changing minds because they don't see the value, right? It's the what's in it for me. Like, notice, and this is consistent over time, is every person that I interacted with in my 25 years really did have a good heart and wanted to do good things, especially when it comes to the environment. They just didn't always know how. So I think what you had was spot on. My question is, how did you do that within that organization? There had to be something that you did, some conversation you had. Who did you talk to that got the people at whatever level to say, oh yeah, we need to, we're going to sign off on this, Jack. You've got full reign. How did you do that? Because that's tough, right? You're dealing with CEOs that you talked about, sometimes egos
Yes.
float around.
So I had to, it was easier in my case because safety and health is often a part of HR. And safety and health is a big thing when you got rock quarries and asphalt plants and those kind of things. And so, and being in compliance, because we'd have OSHA and MSHA. MSHA is the Mine Safety and Health Organization, and OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health. So we had those inspections. So being in compliance. So we already had that focus. And so they looked at environmental is also a compliance thing. So let's put it under you. But at the same time, we've got to get people on board with all of this to make it work. And it's a people thing. So they did see the people angle. So it made it a little easier for me to be able to absorb that role in the organization. But then I want to mention this. Then when you think about sustainability projects, just getting people to recycle or getting people to do something in the office that's going to help save electricity, for example. You're saving money for the organization, but you're also saving some environmental issues as well. So that's following a chain of value here. On any project or program that we're talking about, we got to first start with reaction, making sure people perceive the value of this. They see why it's needed. I mean, they see that this is valuable to them as well as to the organization. And it's something that they need to be committed to do. So that's getting the mindset, the reaction. And then having them knowing what are the issues, what's at stake, and what's involved, and what they can do. So that's the learning part. So you got reaction and learning, and then you have application. What is it can you do? We not only what you can do, we want you to do it now. So that level is doing things, following through, making it work, being successful with it. And then you got the impacts at the end. you're saving some money for the company, but you're also protecting the environment. You got wins here both ways. And Walmart could see that very clearly. Hey, that's saving us some money. Let's pass it on to the customers. Not just say, hey, let's do it for cost savings. That's not their driver necessarily, although that's their vision and mission is to always have the lowest prices.
Mhm.
They're helping the environment in a big way, and they're passing it on to the people who need it most.
Yeah, a couple things. One, reaction. I've seen the reaction and the learning, and then I've seen a lot of organizations stop at the learning. The
Yeah.
reaction, the learning, and then nothing else. And then they wonder why, okay, we did it, we
Nothing happened.
educated, and nobody, and they rely on people's ability to just do the next two things as opposed to working that into that strategy for that program. And so I love that you have those 4 steps: reaction, learning, application, and then impact, because I'm curious how you've seen in organizations that when the employees see that impact, how that helps them create more buy-in to the
Yes.
next initiative and the next program that they do.
You raise a good point, because if you think about reaction and learning, they support each other. My reaction is based on what I learn often, and the more I learn, the more positive my reaction. Well, application and impact have the same kind of relationship. That is, the more impact I see and have, the more I'm willing to do even more now. And but the impact comes from the applications. We got to do it to get the impact, but having the impact also supports doing more of it. And you're right. So many times we stop and don't get the application. See, there's 2 very important things that we people need to know. Is it, what am I supposed to do about this, and why are we doing it? What am I supposed to do is the application, and why is the impact? And you got to get both of those things in place. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and resources.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys didn't get that written down, rewind it, go back a few times, because those are, I would have loved to have known that when I was a very new manager and I had multiple people within the organization. I was young, I was 20, and I already had a team, and this would have been so helpful to me, is how do I get my team on board? Those 2 questions alone. Thank you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Next, and I want to make sure we're on time, but how does an HR strategy address the challenges of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the modern workplace, right? It's all over. Everybody's talking about it, no matter what conversation you're in. So how does a strategy apply, or excuse me, help with that? And then what are some pitfalls that organizations can avoid when they're developing, right? Because when you're developing that strategy, there are pitfalls to how you do that when it comes to diversity and inclusion and equity.
Yes. So I think that's a great topic to look at, because it gets right to those 2 key things that you're thinking about there. First, we have to show the value of this. And people get turned off when I talk about showing the business impact of diversity, and even the ROI for having diversity. And I have to say, if it's done right, it's there and it's very positive. And they say, I've got all the support I need. I don't need this. And we say, you have support because it's the right thing to do. It's a moral thing to do. It's a legal thing to do. There's no executive who's going to say, I don't support diversity and inclusion and equity. They're just not going to say that. But if you can show them the business value that delivers, you really got them now. They're going to support you even more. But also, they'll support you when the downturns come. Now, what we see now, there's been a lot of press this recently of how the diversity, equity, and inclusion workforce is being displaced. They're letting people go in those roles. Even the chief diversity officers are being removed and displaced. And it's a shock to the community. It's no shock to me, because we talked to some of those groups, and they said, we don't really need to show the value of what we do because we got all this great support. I said, that's a trap, because great support means you won't put the accountability in, but if you let time get a little tough, or they're trying to look an uncertain future, or trying to save some resources, this is something they will trim away. They don't trim it away in terms of saying we're cutting our workforce. They just don't replace the jobs uh, when they become vacant,
Right.
or they won't put any more resources into there. That's their way of saying, I don't really see the value. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, but I'm not going to do a lot of it. And so we really got to take these kind of projects, and that's one of our publication is a book on showing the value of DE&I, and we'd be happy to share some studies on that if you'd like. That's so critical. It's so powerful. You see, I just want to mention this. We've got two sets of impacts that come through DE&I. One is what we call the preventive measures. We do it so we prevent the bad things from occurring. That's people leaving, people complaining, people uh, grieving with grievances.
Right.
Are they file lawsuits and so forth. We do it to prevent that, but also we do it to make things better, because you can get more productivity, you can get more innovation if you've got diversity, and if it's a customer facing situation, you probably get more sales. So when you look at that, that adds to the preventive measures, and it shows you a huge ROI. You put that in front of an executive, they want to invest more. You can say, to heck with all this pressure to be the right employer with DE&I. It's a good business decision. You want to do it for the shareholders. When you got that, they're going to keep supporting it and put more money into you, and not even think about touching it during a downturn.
Oh, I love that, because everybody thinks it has to be in either or, and I love that it's both, right? It
Yes.
can be the right thing and it can be a good business decision. That doesn't make it bad. It actually confirms and changes more minds, because you're meeting people where they're at, right? You think of executives are getting all of this bombardment. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this for the right reasons. And what I think that ROI and changing that is changing the heart of the reason that you're doing it. It's the right thing to do. It is from a sustainability standpoint, your diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's actually going to have longevity, because you have somebody who's now committed, like you've pulled them in multiple ways, which we all need, not just one-offs. But wow, I think that's amazing that you can show. So what's the
Yeah.
name of that book that you have? Do you have
It's
a book or
measure.
studies? You said studies. It was the diversity.
Yeah. It's a measuring the our return on investment in employee relations and compliance. That's the name of the book. But in
Okay.
that, it's got divert. The subtitle's got diversity in it. But again, we can give you more detail on that if you'd like.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's a topic that everybody can get behind. And how do I help my organization as a whole change? Because it is the right thing to do. And we just know that.
Yes.
Jack, I would love to know, HR strategies are not set in stone, right? They, at least in my experience, they need to be very, it's like a living, breathing document, I call it. So I would love to know, how often should companies reassess their HR strategies to ensure that they remain relevant and effective?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We've got to be flexible here, but usually review them or set them each year. Although
Okay.
they may be a long-term strategy, you want to go with a one-year review, I would say. But also checking progress either quarterly or every 6 months to just see where we are with our strategy. Are we making progress? What's getting in the way? Do we need to readjust in some way? But also keeping our antennas out internally and externally to see if something else is coming along that we need to prepare for or plan for. Maybe it's a new strategy. And this is where an HR team has to be so familiar with the organizations in terms of their issues, their challenges, their problems, and their measures of performance, but also looking externally, what's going to affect that, disrupt that in some way, and trying to head that off as a preventive issue if we can. So we've really got to be looking both internally and externally with what's happening so we can make quick adjustments.
Thank you. I have two more things. One is human capital is a word that's coming about more and more and more. And your book is High Impact Human Capital Strategy. Can you give us a sneak peek into that book?
Yes. So it's really looking at the major forces that are influencing organizations. Whether we want them or not, they're there and they'll continue. There are major categories. And my pitch is HR has got to be an active role. For most of them, HR needs to be the driver for this.
Mm.
But the whole focus is on making sure you show the impact of what you're doing. The key thing there is the high impact. And what we often miss as HR is the opportunity to help drive the business and deliver a lot of good results for the business. And we sometimes get satisfied because we're in compliance and we're handling the legal issues, and we are efficient with our own operations. But that's not enough. That it's almost like Jack Welch used to say way back in the day when he was CEO of GE. He says, a lot of my colleagues looked at HR as a health and happiness sideshow. He says, I look at it as different. I look at it as a business driver. And he used it that way. We've got to be a business driver. Even if we're in a nonprofit or government, you drive those key measures in that organization. And so all of these strategies are about driving this organization forward. So we'd love to get that book in anyone's hands if you like. You can, I don't know if you've got a way of getting that to us, but Jack at roinstitute.net is one way, and that's me. But we'll be happy to send that copy to you.
Great. We'll put it in. We'll put some comments and ways or into how people can get access to that, because that's going to be huge. I was actually talking to somebody else who said that's human capital is actually affecting how people are investing in organizations as a whole, which should have been. If you have a healthy human capital within your organization, then you are a thriving business. Jack, we have a lot of people that might have smaller businesses, and I can hear them saying, yeah, but I've only got a few employees, and why do I need an HR strategy? I don't have a full HR department. What would you say to people who are not there yet, don't have a full HR department, but understanding the value that this can bring to an organization? What would you say to them are some of the things that they can do, even in a smaller organization, to do this?
But I'd say first, if you've got someone at least partially responsible for HR, usually. So there's usually somebody there who takes care of that, even if it's 10 or 12 employees. But you want to set some goals for the HR side of the business in terms of it. Yes, you want to deal with the attraction and retaining key staff, which is a big thing, but you also have to look at this issues of engagement and culture and performance, and how do you measure that and drive that. So you want to have some goals around that, even if the organization doesn't have a strategy. That doesn't keep you from having a strategy. You know, where you want to take your function. Usually when you get to 100 employees, you know, you usually have a couple of full-time people. Again, by then you probably got a strategy for the organization, and you want to be a part of it. You need to be a part of it. And I think most executives would want that to be a huge part of it, because they realize that it won't ever get done without the right kind of team members here. And they realize the power of this and the influence of this. We want them to not look at us as administrative and legal and compliance. Yes, we take care of that, but we're much more than that. And I remember having a student in one of my classes I was teaching on this subject came back to me one time and says, I was interviewed for a job as HR manager in a company. And the question was put in front of me by the CEO of the company and says, what will you bring to the organization if we hired you? He says, I'm going to make you more profitable. I'm going to control some costs. I'm going to increase your productivity. I'm going to add value to the organization. And it's going to be more value than you're putting into it. You'll get positive results from what we do. And he got the job, and he says, the CEO says, never heard an HR person tell me that before. It's like, I'm going to keep you out of jail, or I want to make sure we're in compliance. I'm going to make sure everybody follows the rules. They know that that's fundamental, but that's not really why we're there. We got to be a driver for the organization.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you again so much for your time. I could ask you questions that go on and on. I had a few more that came up. I appreciate you guys. If you have not yet had a chance, Jack is also on LinkedIn. You can connect with him there. He's had a couple of other summits he's been a part of. Jack, what other ways do you want me to, can they connect with you? Anything else you have for parting words for anybody who's in the audience?
Yes, you can come to me directly, jack@roinstitute.net, and we can respond to whatever you have. We'd like to get some information to you to help in the situation. We've got lots of resources on our website. A lot of them are free. So go there, it's roinstitute.net. So we're all about showing the value of what you do. And that's the name of one of our books. Show the value of what you do, wherever you are. And I'd say at least half of our business, I should say, is in the HR umbrella. And that's where I had most of my career. But we also support, technology and marketing and innovation and quality and all of those kind of things as well. But HR is our focus today. We got lots of HR publications. We'd love to get those in your hands. Let us know if we can help.
Great. You guys, thank you again. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to this phenomenal conversation. You have just gotten a wealth of knowledge that even in my 25 years, he's condensed, gotten into short amount of time. So thank you for that, Jack. And we look forward to seeing everybody in the next meeting, next interview. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.